I guess before I get into my list of things, is there anything you'd like to just toss out there? Or you said you're doing some the game developer thing. How is
Yep.
all the other work progressing?
I do have some things to say. We kind of I may have started a trading card game collectible thingy with in relation to our game accidentally. So we've been on a game event. What was it called? GDS in Czech Republic for game developers. Like I haven't been there personally because it's in Bohemia and I was pretty far and doing something else at the time. But I suggested that as like marketing instead of some like dumb leaflets, we do something that people actually would like to keep. So I proposed we could do like collectible cards, and we went ahead with it, and apparently it had a big success there. So I guess I
Are they,
might.
are they like artwork on each card, or are they
Yep,
actually like stats, like
artwork and flavor text
artwork and flavor text? Cool. And then
done
the
by.
artwork's based on the game that you're doing,
Yep,
basically.
from like lore, characters, and places and spells and stuff from our world that we're developing.
That's awesome. How many characters? How many cards did you make so far? Was there a whole
Well,
bunch, or just like
it's
10?
just we just made the thing that is going to maybe cost like $5 million in the far future when the thing is going to be popular eventually, maybe. So it's like just like a set of like a dozen, maybe. Actually, we had a big argument about like how much cards we can do at this time, and so it had to be a very limited set, very exclusive. I'm waiting to get a hold of it myself personally, of my personal pack of the
Did you
cards,
print,
because
did you print them out yourselves, or did you have them kind of made by an actual kind of card printing company of some
but
kind?
we did pay somebody to produce it. It looks kind of like, again, I didn't have them in my hand, but they do look kind of like professional. It's not just like on paper or something. It's
Yeah.
actually like printed cards normally
Or-
are. It's just not like economically sustainable for us to be like printing a bunch of them at this
yeah,
moment at all.
it makes sense. That's pretty cool. It's a neat idea. Right
So
on. So it's progressing. What's the timeline like? Are you looking to go live sometime this year, or is it still a couple
well,
years out?
we already at the GDS we had a functional demo actually. We had like a hackathon for like a week, and during that we actually whipped up a functional demo of the game. So we plan to do a couple more hackathons because it's like all volunteers basically. So
Yeah.
we kind of have to manufacture a special event to actually do a bunch of work
Mm.
at like a fast pace of time. But we are definitely planning on like to have something within a year or so that actually can be called a game. Although you know how it is with development of games these days, it's just like for 3 years
Alpha,
in alpha.
beta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go through the whole
Yeah,
alphabet.
for sure. And
So
then my brother's a big fan of indie games in general. Like he just is always looking for the next big thing, right? And a lot of them are quite well done, even though they don't have much artwork or graphics. But they can, if you have a neat idea and a neat storyline, you can get a lot of followers. It's pretty impressive how far you can get on Steam with just kind of an idea.
yep,
Is it Czech language, or is it English, or what are you
English.
doing the
Well,
game in?
obviously we aim to release it basically bilingually in Czech and English as like the step one. So everything I or my colleague writes, we will definitely also translate to the other language, regardless of in which language we wrote the first part.
That's
So
awesome.
definitely
So is this
bilingual.
like, how many people total? Is it like 5 guys, 10 guys, just kind of developing this whole thing from
Well,
scratch?
it's an interesting thing by itself in how you can make people do things when you don't have budget. In that we almost started making games with my actually roommates who are programmers. And
Yeah.
we also had that idea for a year. So I basically was developing already a world for a game for some time, as you know. And it didn't start actually because we basically figured out that we don't have a graphics person, and you probably would need a bunch, not just one. And we couldn't like we weren't sure that we could get funding in any reasonable way. So and we expect business thing. The fault in our logic was that you require money to pay for people to do any graphics for a game. What we
Right.
didn't account for is that you can also inspire people who really want to make games to just make a game.
Okay.
Because what else are they going to be doing? Yeah, sure, they're going to be doing something paid so that they can eat and survive and stuff, of course. But outside of that, there's a bunch of people who would also want to work on a game. So it's kind of a, I guess you could technically call it unpaid internship type thing, and it's just the specifics of that are that you basically have, and that's why I'm sort of having this like long explanation. is you can't just say like 5 people, because it's basically a larger amount of people who are rotating. Because like sometimes like they have to like stop working on it for a bunch of time because they have just other stuff that they need to be doing for school or for money making purposes. But that doesn't mean that they won't, return when they have time again, or that they don't like do intermittent stuff. And what you need is that to make sure that at every point in time there are always in each team like 2 or 3 people. So it's like 2 or 3 graphics people at each time, or like 2 writers, and then like 2 programmers at least, 2 or 3, and an extra person who's doing something in between, like level design or something that like connects like story and graphics and programming, to also be like the contact person. So like as long as at all points in time you have, and marketing people, and like 2 or 3 marketing people. So actually that's like what you need to have in total to be making any progress. But apparently with rotating internships you can do that with no money.
Are you actively trying to recruit new people constantly, kind of just through word of mouth, or is you advertising online to recruit new?
Also word of mouth, because the people who already participated also know people who might also want to participate. But also just I like how they got me is that they were posting ads in like developer groups on social media. So I basically just responded to an ad that I didn't even see, but my friend, who's one of the programmers, my former roommates with whom I wanted to be making games, he actually pointed me to that ad because he noticed it. So kind of a word of mouth thing.
How would it work when you finally release it, like economically speaking? Is it owned by everybody who works on it a certain amount? Are you tracking time at all? Like,
good question. We are tracking time, so that's a part of it. But also, so there's 2 different questions. Like first is like the business model, like how it will be making money. The second is how will you determine from the money made who will get paid what. I think it's like 2 separate questions. The game business model is actually the more difficult to answer, because it's going to be a bit mobile game, because it has to be something like you need to have a fast iteration. You need to actually produce something relatively quickly, and so a smaller game project is a better idea for like a starter project. So that's why it's going to be a mobile game. So then the question is, we don't want to, obviously, because it's like an indie passion project, we don't want to make it pay to win, because that would suck. So we don't want to make a game that we wouldn't want to be playing. That just doesn't make any sense. So which actually is kind of revolutionary in the mobile game market, like as ideas go. So that's we believe it might give a slight edge that we actually are not making shovelware. So just it's how sad the state of the industry is.
Definitely important to me as well.
So that's like obviously level 1 of that. But then we are not against ads necessarily, but like what must not be in there are paywalls, meaning that like you have to be paying or you can't progress in the game. So the question that we're still sorting out is the full extent of like what you could pay for without it damaging the game experience. Because part of it is like, there could be some cosmetic things that maybe people may want to pay for that don't really affect anybody winning. But also there's this, because actually it's inspired a little bit by this one comedy group who make videos particularly about games, like sketches. And one of those is like about this like paying to win transactions in the game. And there's actually the full sensible argument on the side of people who want to be paying for stuff in the games. And that's like it's a trade-off between, because it's specifically genre-wise a bit of an idle game, meaning that like you don't have to be micromanaging the game 100% of the time for it to be doing stuff. And so the whole reasoning with which it started, the model of the game, and translates into what should we pay for, is that it's supposed to be for people who maybe don't have all that much time, because maybe they need to be making money working at a job or something, but they still kind of want to be playing a game on a more of a long-term-ish basis. And for that, it actually makes sense for them to like convert money into game time, but not in a paywall-y type way. But it's like if you really, really want to pay for the game to speed through parts of it a little bit, if you're playing single player stuff, then that seems logical to us, as long as without paying for it, you're just progressing at a normal speed, which isn't designed to be frustrating. Is like the sort of balance that we aim to strike with it, for that to make sense.
Yeah, I think as long as it doesn't feel grindy at all naturally, part of the fun of a game is the leveling up part, right? So it kind of takes away the whole point of the game if you're just paying to skip kind of the point,
Sure,
the fun
but
part.
like we
I
really
hear you.
think it's like a two different mindsets of two different
It
types
is,
of
yeah.
people in different life situations.
Yeah. Some people just don't have as much time. They still want to get through the whole game and see the story and the end of the game, but they just don't have, the 100 hours it might take to grind through it. They might have 10 hours and they want to skip through.
Specifically, those would be the people who do have a bunch of money because that's why they don't have time.
Yeah, because
This is the
they're
reason.
busy working. No, and it makes sense. And I think that's been relatively successful. I definitely prefer kind of the cosmetic skin model because it feels a little more like volunteering. You're basically donating money as a support, and you get a little cool, skin.
Yeah,
A little bit
because
like Kickstarter.
yeah, that's the
Because
alternative. We of course also are trying Patreon because like if we can make our, that's why we actually try to do things like a podcast also or marketing stuff so that we might get that functioning. Because if we do, if the Patreon alone or some things like that, crowdsourcing or crowdfunding will work out, then we won't have to need to
yeah,
monetize it any further. But that's just like the sort of plan B
yeah.
approach.
In my mind, it would definitely be great if like every game in the world was kind of a pay what you think it's worth kind of thing after you play it, and everybody had enough money and enough, whatever basic income that they could easily attribute a certain amount of whatever they have to the games they like and the games they play each month. Maybe automatically, maybe based on the hours they play it. Where basically the game developers are paid. A million people play the game for 10 hours a month, they'll get paid a certain percentage of that person's disposable entertainment income automatically based on what they do, or maybe, based on what they choose, how they choose to distribute it on kind of an automatic ongoing basis, or, one time basis if they want. I just think that that's kind of an interesting model and people would be more likely to donate and support games that they like because they'll want to see more of those games in the future. So it becomes kind of a self-iterating feedback
No,
loop
it's like,
of
you
goodness
would
that
actually
people
then
came with
have
along.
an actual like free true market or like
Right,
true market
right.
valuation of how good games are in that situation.
Yeah, you kind of pay after the fact. Obviously, some people take advantage of it and they won't pay anything. Maybe it's where you could base it on time played to some extent. If there was some kind of international treaty on how much your time is worth per game or something,
Well, it could be just
it'd be
an
cool.
industry convention. Like you don't need treaties to establish
Yeah,
basic rules of how an industry functions.
yeah. Even just like 10 cents an hour played or something of your basic income goes towards supporting this game that
Yeah,
you
because
enjoy
like
playing.
in game industry specifically, like they basically do have like a general convention about like how much should like for like what the price of games should be. Like the prices of games are like very universal and basically stable within the whole market. It's just like people can then like complain or feel like it wasn't worth the money if like the game is priced as a different tier than what it's supposed to be,
Yeah.
in terms of production values or general quality.
I'm definitely excited for you that you're getting kind of involved in this. I really hope it takes off. Any lesson you learn from there, we can definitely apply to anything we do from Project Contribute.
I actually, one of the things that seems random but is actually really connected to the game development stuff and also to the economic stuff. My friends, like those with whom I didn't end up making games, have forced me finally to play Minecraft with them. I'm not sure if have you played Minecraft at all?
Yes, but my son is really big into it. My 18-year-old son loves Minecraft. I've played it a couple of times. Um, but I will tell you, I do enjoy the Deep Rock Galactic kind of more action-oriented version of Minecraft. Have you ever heard of that? We've been
I
playing
haven't.
that as a group the last few weeks. And it's quite fun. Like I definitely get the satisfaction of mining your materials away and building stuff with those materials and kind of building up your kingdom, whatever it might be you're building. So I definitely understand the allure. I'm a little old for when it came out. I kind of missed my genre. I feel like the younger
Yeah,
people that were
yeah,
kind of
it
kids,
wasn't.
sandbox age when the sandbox came out, they grew up with it. So it's a little
It
more
wasn't formative for us.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's not my demographic. There are very few people my age that play it.
yeah, and I think it may actually be a bad thing because the thing is, I was like playing it a whole bunch. I have to admit in the last like 2 months because I actually, fortunately for my productivity, I can multitask. Like I can actually learn by listening to stuff and also play a game at the same time, and it works. So that's like good for me, because other than that, I would definitely not have enough time for stuff. But I did play it a bunch, and one of the things I already actually suggested in the game studio we should do for marketing purposes is promotion. Is actually to try to do at some point, when we already have like a product to promote, that we actually do something like a session where we actually like do like building up our world in Minecraft or something.
That would be huge. Yeah, and there's tons of good Minecraft YouTubers that make a living, building these worlds, and people watch them just play the different obstacle courses or whatever it might
Yeah,
be. So
but because
that's
that's
definitely
the
something
thing
to do.
is, I then thought about it some more, and I realized like maybe that's what the future building community should be doing to promote their ideas, maybe also, because the
Yes.
main benefit of the Minecraft thingy, even if like you personally aren't the biggest fan of it because your generation isn't, it's not a thing of our generations actually. The thing is, it has a huge inbuilt audience of young people who are really into constructively building stuff and are also
Well,
probably technically savvy.
and my son has actually tried that a couple of times where he just takes 5 or 6 friends and they try to build a whole community, economy,
Yep.
world, political world based on their 6, goals of what to get out of the Minecraft world. And it's been fairly successful just to kind of try to set boundaries and rules and things to live by in your small community. So it'd definitely be fun to try. And I definitely feel like Jeff Grobert's trying to do something similar with his virtual currency,
Yeah.
right? Where he's trying to build some kind of world, maybe a Minecraft world as a way to kind of start it. But
Yeah, because the benefits of the Minecraft thingy, it's like I think the system of it is actually very impressively thought out and functional. Is one of the like game design things that I've learned from that. Is I was griping about nobody being able to do like emergent generation of universes so far, and I was wrong because Minecraft can do it. It's actually within its constraints, like dimensions, because obviously
yeah,
everything is cubes and it's simplified. But within the constraints, it's basically mathematically solved. And with their like some of the actually latest additions that my friends were very excited even after a bunch of years of them playing it to play it this year, because they added stuff. They added like spontaneously generated cave systems like in the depths of the world and stuff, which look very sort of realistic as like biomes, or like very realistic in terms of like looking at natural formations type stuff. So on that sort of like game world generating emergently level, it's incredibly impressive. But also, as I was playing it, also with like 5 or 6 of my friends, exactly, and that's the same way. You do actually have to set up a community with rules and stuff. And it's actually a political exercise as well as economical exercise, because then you have to figure out like who's getting what and how do you trade stuff. It's actually very instructive. Like you learn so much about like some like how like why people did a specific thing at some point in history when they were pushed into a particular like resource based constraints, because then you find yourself having to do the like same consideration of a thing that you then realize, if I was in that situation in real life, I might actually have to do this thing that I normally think is like immoral or I wouldn't be doing. Because like there's a bunch of stuff like obviously you can even how simplified it is. Like there's the whole thing like how do you treat villagers who are like NPC characters in that world who can't really do stuff on their own very much or can't defend themselves, and then like you have like people who basically like build up without thinking about it, build a concentration camp for them because like of their utility to them, and then they started thinking about like, wait a minute, that's like that feels like a bit you sort of catch yourself doing a thing that if you weren't aware substantially of it being bad in the real world, you did for utilitarian reasons in that
yeah.
world.
It depends on whether you view villagers as independent, free-thinking beings or just AI to be used however we want to use them, right? And it's like our robots. It's a real-world question of how do
Sure,
we treat robots?
but with a little bit of role playing. It's just like
Okay, yeah.
how those like people who don't really have any political ambitions and stuff in the real world, who just want to live their lives, or you can like very easily see how it would be just like, oh, so that's how like ambitious people who can do stuff treat people who they feel aren't doing anything with their freedom that's sufficiently impressive. So let's just I don't know, like build like those things like farms. Just like also like one of the other ethical things that you run into is like you want to maximize your production of a particular resource, so you build like a horrific like farm for some animals where there's just like a whole bunch of them in a very small space, and it just keeps just killing them constantly and just keeps producing the thing you want. And then again, you catch yourself doing that because you did it to maximize some efficiency or something. And then you're watching it for a little bit, and then you start thinking to yourself, maybe that's like why like this sort of like psychopaths in our world are actually creating contraptions like that, because they really don't understand the ethical dimension of like
how tyrants emerge, right? And how just learning how human mind thinks, because it definitely is always looking for optimization, min-maxing.
Yeah, but also like specifically, if like what we want is like to build a better future or something, I think one of the drawbacks of these really good ideas and visions is that they're not very well visualized. And what you can do in Minecraft is really visualize them, because you not only have like solve these like systems that you can demonstrate, like how you've solved particular systemic problems there, or like how are you running economy or whatever within the constraints of the world, but you can also have like it looking like something, even like including architecture and stuff, because like of course you can do quite impressive architectural stuff in Minecraft to give form to the idea.
That's a neat idea. We can definitely play with it. I can probably enlist my son to come up with some ideas as well. So you never know. What was the other one? I finished Baldur's Gate 3 as well with my son. So that was another interesting, life lesson game with a lot of interesting turns. Did you finish it yourself? You're still playing, or
I just like as I was gearing up to finish it, I was introduced to Minecraft and I sort of switched. So I guess I'll have to return to it a bit later. So far Minecraft is winning for me.
Yeah, I felt like one good playthrough was enough for me, because I kind of understand all the different choices now, kind of where they lead and the different things that might happen in the other playthroughs. And you can always kind of look up, any videos you want to see online if there's alternate endings you're interested in. So, but I felt very satisfied with the whole game. Played about 100 hours, and definitely got me thinking of what a kind of infinite Baldur's Gate 3 might look like if it was generated by AI. If it was continuously giving you new stories and new videos and what do you call it? The cinematics is really what I always love. I just love the cinematics because it just immerses me in the story. So if it was just kind of an AI creating an infinite number of new challenges, new cinematics, new storylines, new quests, it could be pretty cool. The problem I see that they had in that game is when you max level, right? When you kind of are godlike in power, it gets a little boring. So they kind of capped you off. I think it was level 12 they capped you, right? Normally you go to level 20. I was expecting a level 20 in D&D, but they capped you 12 because you're already kind of strong enough to deal with anything. And at that point, XP doesn't matter anymore. So as soon as XP stopped mattering, I definitely felt this feeling that nothing I do matters. I'm not progressing anymore. Let's just finish the game and be done. Because so it's like, at what point do you kind of continuously, almost you have to scale people back at some point to make it so the progressing is still fun?
It's actually an interesting problem that hasn't, as far as I can tell, hasn't been solved yet, because the only emergent progressive simulation of something that so far that I think was solved, I really think is just for space in Minecraft. Like that's the spatial generation of procedural generation of space in Minecraft is I think close to flawless or like mathematically solved for that number of dimensions and stuff. I don't think anybody did it for like story or combat system, because that's the thing like which they tried in Diablo games, in the latest Diablo games. The scaling thing is one of the things they tried, and that sucks when you just like, because then you also don't feel like you're progressing when like you have to be constantly progressing to just remain even. So that's like it's the old school method, which Baldur's Gate is actually systemically pretty old school. Even their greatest accomplishment, which is that they actually, your choices matter, and they actually go through like the implications of the choices and make the branching possibilities, including the cutscenes. That's just a very work intensive the way they did it. It's just the thing that everybody was promising for 30 years and nobody actually did, but they could have done it 30 years ago if they really wanted to and put in the work. But for various reasons just didn't do the work so far. So this is like finally like the triumph of the maximal potential reached of the classical model systemically of something like Dungeons and Dragons game. It's just for something that works better in the way that it didn't work for you ultimately. It's like you need to develop a different system. Like it has to be, something needs to be different, and it can't just be linear scaling, can't just be some simple fix. It has to be a reimagining of leveling. It's just to be reimagining of what like a difficulty of a fight depends on. Like it has to be like I think quite fundamental improvement that
Yeah.
I'm not seeing anyone figuring out now.
You're right, and then it's got to be different enough each time to still be interesting. Like you can't just restart at level 1 and kind of level up with the same systems. It has to be kind of an entirely new mechanism, entirely new,
Yeah,
spells.
actually,
Just
yeah.
changing classes isn't enough.
Speaking of, that actually also ties into what we were thinking of with the game development of the game that we're developing. Because before we have the mobile game, we can, as like just me and Michal Cherny, the other writer, we could maybe design a board game or card game before then, and like have
Yeah.
a game before the computer game is finished. And just depending on how difficult we want to or complex we want to make that. And so we were thinking, we already had like an episode on the podcast about our ideas about like card games and board games. And one of the things we sort of figured out is that in a way you can make a board game out of cards, because at some point if you're just laying down cards to create a thing, then you just build a board. And so maybe we could do a hybrid between card games and board games.
You need to look
Part of it.
at one of my favorite games at board games ever actually does use a lot of cards, and it's the what's it called? Oh, it's Jeepers Creepers. Why can't I not remember the name? Brain
Jeepers
fart.
Creepers.
It's really, really, really good. Gloomhaven. It's right
Okay.
here. Have you ever heard of Gloomhaven? Have you ever talked about that?
I don't think so.
It started as an indie game about 7 years ago, and what it is, it's a bunch of tiles, and you basically have about 100 different quests that are made up of 4 people, and the 4 people level up from basically 1 to 9, I think. Every time you level up, you get new cards to add to your deck of cards, essentially, that and instead of rolling a d20, you're pulling cards off the top of your deck. Some are +1, +2, -1, -2, and some of them add special magical abilities. But the core is that you're using cards to kind of roll dice in some ways. But then the most interesting part of the game mechanics is everybody has so many abilities. There's a top ability, which is like an attack, and a bottom ability is like a move of some kind, or some kind of support ability. And at any given time, every round, all 4 people plus all the monsters in play have like an initiative order, and each card has an initiative on it, and you choose, everyone at the same time chooses 2 cards that they have to choose to use, and if they want, they can do 2 attacks, they can do 2 moves. So based on what the monsters are doing each round and what you're doing, you choose the 2 cards, and then you have to choose what order to do them in and how to do them. And at the worst case, you have a default of 2 attack or 2 move on the bottom, so you can always just move 2 and have a basic attack if whatever the card says isn't useful for that turn. But you're trying to kind of optimize your use for that turn in a real-time way with everybody else, and making the best of what everyone chooses, which is it's just a really interesting way to do initiative, where you're not really working together. You're kind of treating it like a real-time experience, where you're choosing what to do, and maybe someone else chooses to kill the same monster, and now you have this big attack that you've kind of wasted, but that's how it works in the real world. But it's all based on, building your deck of cards. You start with like 10 like default abilities, and you keep on adding to them every time you up a level.
Yeah, it's actually
and you go into the game choosing those cards.
Yeah, we also discussed something a little bit, I guess, similar game-wise. It's like one of the more interesting ideas, something like this, when you're basically doing deck building throughout the game. And one of those is a new Dune board game. I'm not sure if we talked about it already.
Dune Imperium we talked about, yeah. So that's it's a good mechanic. Definitely worth exploring.
So that's part of it. But also that maybe because we don't just want to make like Disney Plus. Did we already talk about it? Or maybe it happened very recently. Disney Plus announced that they want to make basically a Magic the Gathering rip-off game with Disney characters.
Lorcana. Lorcana is the name of it. Yeah, I think it's a bit sad, but
so we don't want to do that.
Yeah,
we don't want to just like do another clone of Magic the Gathering. Like if we wanted to do something like it, we would just use that software in which you can just create your own Magic the Gathering cards, like for lols. But what we thought about is like actually played another interesting game I had like a lot of fun with. It was a card game. I went to Doctor Who Con actually in Brno, and there was a bunch of merchandise on sale, but one of those things wasn't even a Doctor Who thing. It was a a card game called Fluxx with 2 X's. Do you know that one?
Never heard of that one.
It
Fluxx.
actually, they make decks across franchises. There's a Fluxx game for Doctor Who, but also Fluxx game for different franchises. And Fluxx game that I bought was for Monty Python, and like a Monty Python Fluxx game for like the Holy Grail type thing. And the reason why I chose that was that the Fluxx game is very interesting in that it's one of the rare games where part of the game is changing or developing its rules. You're drawing cards that change game rules, and you decide like which rules to like take away and which rules to introduce or which rules to modify, like including like how many cards everybody draws each turn, or like basically anything if then, like in particular condition, like what counts, what doesn't count and stuff. So you start with something very simple, like the game rules at the beginning are basically just everybody draws 1 card at the beginning of each round, and one of the things is like a maximum card limit is another rule that's set at the beginning in a particular way, and then just you have 2 kinds of cards, which one of them are like good that you want, and one of them are bad that you don't want normally. And the cards you don't want are called creepers, and it's something from the lore of the franchise that they've adapted for the card game. So in Monty Python, like there are cards like just the random stuff from Monty Python. It's like the big foot that like stomps something from the sky, and there's like the nude pianist, and it's like all these kinds of things. And some of the like one of the things that keeps changing the game rule is winning condition, because at the beginning there's no winning condition in the game, so you have to like put like set a rule like which combination of cards that you have counts as a winning condition. And then once the rule is out, that everybody tries to win the game by the emergent winning condition that way. So that's why the game's called Fluxx. And I really like this idea that you have changing game rules as part of the game, that you basically can be like drawing cards for altering what the game is. And so with the same pieces, suddenly you can do different things. It's like as if you had like chess, but then like you draw a card and the card changed how the pieces move, for example, is like a basic interpretation of that. So we're actually looking into maybe doing something like that, like something, because I have seen it in Fluxx, but literally just there. I haven't seen it in any other card game specifically, and basically not even in any computer game for the most part.
Just to throw it out there, Magic the Gathering did something kind of like that with it's called plane shifts, where you could play a commander and you'd have a plane, and every time you'd move a plane, there would be a new rule or something like that.
You're right. It's kind of like that.
It was pretty well done. I liked it. It was a little too, commandery. It wasn't super competitive. It was just for fun. Like, let's explore the planes and see what happens. But definitely, I think fairly well designed as far as
I liked it. Actually, that's like one format of Magic that I've played the most of, maybe with my friends, was the plane chase.
Yeah,
or plane shift.
Plane chase with commander decks. It's fun.